alaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Welcome. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm
Yeah,
very
thank you.
excited, super excited. So, Alhamdulillah, people are joining, and
Good.
I'll just admit them as they come so we can start right away.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, let me just make sure everything's good. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. If you're new to the monthly Halaqa, this is something that we've been doing, alhamdulillah, for 1 year. Every month we invite a guest, or sometimes it's just me. First of all, I'm Meriem, and I have 3 kiddos. We've been homeschooling since the beginning, and I try my best to create resources for homeschoolers, especially people who want to start homeschooling. I do have my background degree in early childhood education, so that's my passion. One of my favorite subjects is hands-on activities, and I'm so happy that we get to talk today with Hannah. And I don't know if I told you this, but you actually encouraged me to go for the hands-on activities, like full on, alhamdulillah. And yeah, so I'm very excited that you're with us today, and I'll let you introduce yourself. If I think everybody knows you, but still.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I know that a lot of you have your cameras off, totally fine. If you do turn them on, I'd love just to see you and say hi. I'm a in-person kind of person when it comes to sharing information. And when we're on Zoom, it almost feels like I'm talking to myself, which has its pros and cons. Sometimes you don't even know how many people are watching. So thank you so much for having me. It sounds like this is something that you have on a regular basis, which I think is phenomenal because we as parents and as homeschoolers need as much support as possible. And so I have been homeschooling for a while. And when we were first homeschooling, and also when I was first having my children, that was the one thing that made parenting and homeschooling even a little bit manageable, was having a support group. And so I'm so pleased that you all have each other, whether it's online or in person. It's going to be so helpful for your longevity and to avoid burnout and whatnot. Your kiddos need it also. They need that socialization and that interaction as well. And so as you're feeding your soul, your children can also be playing with their friends. So now we're going to talk about hands-on activities, which is obviously it's close to my heart. And I see that it's probably close to some of your hearts as well, because you're all here. And I know it's something that you've been doing for a while. But what's really interesting about hands-on activities is that there actually is, I would say, some like windows of opportunities where it's very useful, and then times where we have to put aside our goals for our children when it comes to hands-on activities and let them take the lead. So I want to focus today on primarily children under the age of about 7 or 8. And hands-on activities in that age group might look different than hands-on activities in older age groups. And this, when we understand the childhood development that's going on, then we can manage our expectations of what our children are actually going to be able to do when it comes to hands-on activities. So the first thing I actually want to say about this, because I don't want to forget saying this is one, let's see, yeah, this is one of, in my opinion, one of the most important things to remember when it comes to not just hands-on activities, but pretty much any skill or ability your children are developing versus what you have already practiced for decades. And that's that our fine motor skills have been honed, they're skilled. We have practiced them for decades. Anything that isn't even a developmental skill, whether it's writing or cooking or driving, we have practiced those skills for so many years that we maybe have lost touch of what it was like when we were beginners in any of those skills. Now, our children are beginners in a lot of things, and also they're not quite developmentally capable to do some of the things that we think that they can do. And that's where child development is so important, because we don't want to be asking our children to do things that they are not able to do and then getting frustrated over it, or I remember when my children were first learning how to watercolor, and watercolor in the sense of having it be a lesson for school, not just the fun that they might have had otherwise, although they were boys and the boys weren't as interested in watercoloring, to be honest, until it was something for school. And then they did it for school, but it's not a desire of theirs independently. But I remember when they were 5, and this is at a time when we're, let's say, 5, 6, and then maybe my younger son was maybe 3 or 4. No, probably like 3 and 7. Maybe those were the ages. And then not even my third child was born, and definitely not my fourth, because my kids are about 4 years apart. And I remember showing my son how to hold the paintbrush. And this is at a time when we were investing in some really high quality materials at the start of our Waldorf journey. And so it's a little bit ridiculous to think back on it now, but a single paintbrush at the time was, and it still is, like
Yeah.
$14, which is like
Yeah.
a lot of money for a single paintbrush. And so I was very particular that they were going to use it properly and not go like this with the paintbrush and
Yeah.
completely ruin all the bristles. And I think I spent most of the time trying to teach them how to use it properly versus doing the lesson. And it was really frustrating on my part, not just because I wanted them to learn the skill. They were a little bit young, but also even at 7, they still needed some help. But also those were very high quality materials that I didn't want us to waste, and also to develop the habits of, oh, it doesn't matter, or we're just going to go to the dollar store and get another one. And that kind of mentality is not one that I adhere to. And also, just from an environmental perspective and an Islamic perspective, I just didn't want to include those in our lessons. But my children were probably too young for those skills. That fine motor skill still needed time to develop. And also, there are differences in the genders. For girls, they may have different skills that come earlier, and for boys, they may have different skills that come later. And the thing is that you will always have an anomaly in your family, no matter what. Our children have their own skills and talents that may go against the grain for what's typically expected for their age and for their gender. But for the most part, knowing that boys tend to develop their fine motor skills later, they may need a little more time to get to the level where they are happy with their skills. And that's something else that I especially noticed with my daughter. I think maybe more than my boys, and it's probably because she was a little more expressive than the boys were. So maybe the boys were frustrated with this. I have 3 boys and then a daughter, and they're all roughly about 4 years apart. And I noticed with my daughter, she would get frustrated with what she was envisioning in her head and then wanting it to look like on paper, what maybe it was drawing or watercoloring or knitting or whatever hands-on activity we were doing. And I realized that she was more expressive, and also the skills, she hadn't learned enough skills or practiced them enough to be happy with the quality of her work. And that's a completely different and related topic to not just hands-on activities, but life in general.
Yeah.
Because she had the psychology behind it was, I'm not happy with this, or I don't have the skills to do this, or your work looks better than mine. Because when we're in a homeschool of just parents and child, for the most part, I'll tell you that it's changing though, for the most part, my abilities are going to be more than hers.
Yes.
And my boys. However, and this is a little bit of a tangent, that tide turns very quickly. I think my kids were 5 and maybe even younger when I realized that they knew more than me in certain subject areas. And very quickly, their brains are going to develop and supersede us in no time. So we only have a little, yeah.
I have this with my son, the oldest, a lot. And even like today we were playing a game, Dabble, the spelling game, and I can't win. I shouldn't be faster than him. I'm like, I've been spelling for 30 years now. It's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, like how I guess when they don't want to do that anymore, just because they're comparing their work with you, how can you reassure them that with practice it will get better or they're developing the skill?
Yeah. So actually, I'm glad that you brought me back on track, because this is the one thing that I really want you to walk away with, is that in order to maybe relate better, have more compassion, have a little more empathy with your children when it comes to the skill set, try working with your non-dominant hand. So I'm right-handed. And if I'm going to draw with my left hand, it's going to be a disaster. But once in a while, it's important that we do that. And hey, if you're pretty good with both your hands, then try using your feet, because you have some people who have that skill where they can actually draw
Yeah.
using their toes and
Yeah.
a paintbrush or whatnot. And doing that, oh my goodness, the amount of brain power and the fatigue that it would cause trying to do that. But that's what your children are going through.
Going through this genius. I never thought about that.
Yeah, it really puts it into perspective. We don't realize how much we do not need to practice that anymore, how much it's second nature to us. But the second you use, if you're right-handed, the second you use your left hand, you realize that it requires more brain power to get that fine motor skill, and it can be more frustrating. You definitely don't have the same skill set. And then try your feet. Or, and this is a little bit separate, but I remember a friend of mine many years ago saying that one of the skills that she wants for her children is that they can go into a store, maybe with $5 or $20 with inflation, and they can go through and be able to maybe choose a few things, add it up in their head, know if they have enough money or not. And she wanted them to be able to do this fairly quickly. And I said, yeah, no problem. She was getting a little frustrated that they could. I said, yeah, no problem. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to have everything in a foreign language, like Chinese characters or maybe in Roman numerals, whatever it is, something that you're still learning or you don't know. Now let's do the same thing. And all that does is allows us, because whatever our challenges are that we are still working through, for me, it's impatience. It's going to show up in your teaching and in your parenting. And so if it's going to be something where whatever it is you're lacking, alhamdulillah, we have our children to give us those lessons. It's going to show up in all of our parenting and our homeschooling in one way or another. So that's an aside that I wanted to give you.
It's amazing. Because it does quickly humbles you and reminds you that look how much brain power you need to learn something new, and that's exactly what your kids are doing. And you're standing there like this authority that I know it all. It's more frustrating for them. It humbles you and it gives you more compassion towards them. Yeah. That's great. I love that.
So that can help maybe get a little bit of the what do my kids do if they're not happy with their work, or they're a little frustrated with the progress, or they're a little impatient to get good results. I'll tell you, I'm exactly the same way. I am much older than my children, and I still am challenged by the impatient nature that I have, where I don't want to start from scratch to learn something. I want to get to the part that's enjoyable. And so I don't have really great advice to give you on how you can help your children, because I'm still in it and still frustrated by it. The only thing, and this is like an adult perspective, is baby steps and one step at a time, and also celebrating those wins. But for your children, it's very different, because whether your children are around other children the same age, whether they're around their siblings, which are varying ages, or around their parent or a teacher, no matter what, unless they are happy with their work or they think it's the best in the classroom, they're going to have some kind of feeling about their work. Either they're going to compare to another classmate and wonder, why isn't mine as good as theirs, or theirs looks better than mine, or they will maybe be frustrated that a younger sibling has a better skill set, an assignment, a project, whatnot that they're doing. And so you might feel like, oh, like she's younger than I am and she can do it better. And then there's a whole set of feelings with that. Or they're comparing themselves to the teacher. No matter what, there's going to be comparison. So Islamically, we're always striving to do the best. Like we're such gratitude that we have a religion that says it's not that you're comparing yourself to your siblings' work. It's that you're doing everything with ihsan, that you're striving for the best that you can do. And putting that back on a child, but not younger than 7. So this would be for an older child, is that just reinforcing that, is this the best you can do? Because a lot of times I'll have a kid who's, he or she will do work, and I know that's not your best work. Really, that's your best work? And that you can only do this with an older child. Please don't do this with like younger children.
I did notice that with the like 9-year-olds, 8, 9.
So nine is an interesting developmental change that's a bit of like a catastrophic moment in childhood that's very easily, you can come out of it, of course, like it's part of our development. But even if your child was older and you were challenging that child, is this your best work? You are best whether your child is going to be able to respond to that in a positive way or not. And we do a lot of damage unbeknownst to ourselves when it comes to how we talk to our children about their work and whatnot. And we can also do a lot of good. And you also have to know what the vibe of the times is. And so my parenting generation, which is a little bit older maybe than most of yours, we were coming out of a time of everyone gets a participation medal. We're overly praising our children. And I think now there's a little more balance where we're not overly praising our children and it's okay to lose. And there's those kinds of things as well.
Yeah,
so
because I lost
sorry.
I was gonna say something. It's gone. But
I'm so sorry.
I had a question, but I have that. I'll ask it later. Or
Okay.
I can ask it now if you want.
So you don't mind? I personally don't mind. If you have a question now, it also helps me understand like what's needed from everyone.
Yeah, just for the chat too as well. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. My other question, that this is from what I noticed from working with moms who have younger kids. Like this, now I remember what I was gonna say. You can't really find a straightforward answer to what to do exactly when my child doesn't want to do this or that, because that's the beauty of homeschooling, because you're there, you're present with them, and you get to collect those cues with time, so you understand that vibe, you understand. We get to practice. We're all new to homeschooling, and the more you do it, you get to practice, and you'll do some damage some days, and other days you'll realize that and you'll try to rectify it, inshallah. So that's what I was gonna say. The question is, why hands-on activities could be watercolor, baking, woodworking, handcrafts. I know a lot of these skills scare a lot of moms, especially I guess my generation. We did not really learn these things. And I remember, like, I grew up again in Morocco, so it's a bit different than America, but I remember my mom like pushing for these skills, and I was the only one in my circle that was doing handcrafts. Nobody else cared about it. So which kind of activities to try to push? Maybe if your child does not like knitting or crocheting, should we even push for that, or go on to hammering some nails or something like that, because the goal is to find motor skills? If you have any insight on that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great question. Okay, so much to dive into here. You are, as a parent and a homeschooler, of course, in charge, and you are the captain of the ship, and you can certainly take feedback, but you also know more. You are here to raise your children, right? So you, in theory, should know more. I say that like tongue in cheek, because really our children are our teachers as well. They have rights upon us, and we need to raise them and teach them and whatnot. Now, at the same time, we may not know. Maybe this is your first time homeschooling, and every time as your children grow, it's always going to be a new year, no matter what. Even when your children are completely grown, you've never had that age before. We sometimes look towards other people, to books and whatnot, to figure out what we need to do or what we should do or what might enhance our children. That's wonderful and that's great. What you said is that it's maybe not so much the knitting, but it's the fine motor skills. So maybe if knitting's not the thing, what else is there? So understanding what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, will help direct whether or not you need to shift paths and change what that project is, or that hands-on activity. When children are less than 7, the hands-on actually, let me modify this. Children birth to 7 are in a developmental phase where they are ripe for imitation. So they're going to be copying you, whatever it is that you're doing, your behavior, your speech, etc. They're going to be copying you. Also, at this time, play is their work. We see it as, oh, they're just playing. No, that's their job, that's their work, that's part of their development, that is part of their fitra. They instinctively know what they need to do. We still need to raise them, obviously, but whatever they're doing, granted, it's in a whatever you deem as a safe environment, because that's quite subjective, and that they're cared for. Whatever they're doing is right. Now, the caveats are that for me, it does not include media or screen time or electronic toys, video games. So let's take that out for a moment, because if those are in their environment, they will be distracted by those things, and they may not be able to really go with what they're instinctively supposed to do, because they're highly distracted by something that's maybe not so good for them. Older than 7, we can open that chapter and talk about it. So younger than 7, open-ended play is always just going to be so golden for them. Now, that of course can include hands-on activities, but sometimes we as parents and teachers choose hands-on activities that have a very specific goal in mind. And those are okay too. We're baking bread that has a very specific goal in mind, but here is the dough. You can play with the dough first. That's open-ended. And then, take those bits and then you can make something with it. But the open-ended aspect of the hands-on play or hands-on activities is so important, because that's what children need more than something that has a specific goal in mind. After 7, still you want an abundance of open-ended activities, but when you're introducing other things that have a very specific goal, then make sure that goal is something that you understand, it's in line with your educational goals, etc. For us, we'll play a lot of board games, which is not exactly hands-on, but it does have a particular goal in mind, versus an open-ended activity like Legos, which is hands-on and could be a game, but the children they're not doing it to get to the end. They're really there for the journey. Okay, so for younger grades, okay, and I understand the mess with little kids is sometimes what keeps me from doing some activities, because it's just 5 minutes of play for an hour of cleanup does not sound that great to me. So now it's what kind of hands-on activities are we going to do that's going to maximize that benefit for them and minimize like all the stress involved for me, because let's face it, hands-on activities are probably more stressful, probably than almost anything else other than taking little kids to the pool, which is super stressful. So what kind of things can you do that's going to be and safe? I say this subjectively because really we're not looking for a sterile environment for our children, but we do need to mind their overall safety. However, children are fairly capable, and let's say children maybe 3 or 4 and older. We're lumping a lot of ages here, but I'm primarily speaking of children younger than say 8 or 9. I'm really focused on like the younger kids, but really not younger than say 3 or 4, because I feel like they need quite a bit more supervision. But from let's say 4 to 8, children are fairly self-aware of what they can do. Now, it doesn't mean they still won't get hurt. If you're like, okay, we're going to cut an apple today, they're probably going to get hurt, but they probably won't get injured. And we really need to distinguish between the two so that we know what is safe. Getting hurt is okay. Getting injured is not okay. And we want to keep our children from getting injured, but we want to give them the opportunity to get better at those skills so that they're not getting injured, because a little hurt is okay. So I need a Band-Aid because I nicked my finger, or I got a bruise, or I bumped my leg. Those things are okay. I broke my arm because I fell out of a tree. Let's like maybe figure a few of those things out. And you might be a parent who's, no, like that was a learning experience. Like he ended up okay. That's okay. So whatever you feel comfortable with.
Depends on the insurance.
Yes, but there's so much for boys especially, and I speak from experience and just from the research that I've done. I've had 3 boys, 1 girl. My boys, if you want to look at a curriculum for ages, say 8 or 9 and younger, this is what it is. Building, climbing, running, digging, breaking, building, exploring, adventure. That's what they need to do. And those are mostly gross motor skills that they are honing those skills before they're moving into the fine motor skills. Girls, I honestly, I have less to say about the girls. I find that a schooling culture is possibly not as damaging for girls as it is for boys. The sit for so many hours, the concentration on, or the fine motor skill expectations is a bit more damaging for boys. Girls tend to have those skills earlier and can navigate a school system with less fallout.
Yeah.
I do want to, if it's okay, to read one of the questions in the chat.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So it's Afnan is
yeah.
asking, how do you navigate a child that doesn't want to respond to any kind of direction being told to do something, even if it's a fun educational activity? The minute I give direction, they shut down. And I have a child who loves a challenge being given to her and another who just does not respond that well. Yeah, like it's really tough. So if you've got multiple ages, multiple kids, and I don't know that this is the best thing, I'll just tell you what happened with me, is that I gave my concentration to the child who was most responsive. And everyone else learned from the being present in the environment, but not getting direct education to them. Now, this could be anything. This was like, I know the concentration is primarily hands-on activities. So I don't want to ignore that by giving you such broad suggestions and my experience that's so broad, but here's what would happen. And it included hands-on activities as well. But out of the 4 kids, I was probably homeschooling 2 at a time because of their age differences, because one was just older and out, and then the other one was so young, wasn't being homeschooled. So usually they're about 2 at a time. And then other people who were just like in the mix. And I would teach to one, and mostly it was whoever was the most responsive. And sometimes children, actually a lot of times children who are young learn through play. So they'll listen and they're building their Legos and they're hearing you tell a lesson, but they don't want to stop and give you eye contact and be like, I want. They do. Have you had a child who can hear you having a juicy conversation from 2 rooms down? They know every word, but then you call them and tell them to come and do something and they can't hear you all of a sudden. Children know when to listen. And so the point is that if the more you lower your voice, the more they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What are they saying? So all I know, and really I should say that this is a little bit part of my personality, is that in avoiding conflict, I just chose the child who was most receptive. Now, was this good always? Was this good in the long run? Was this what I needed to do to survive in that moment? You can spend an hour unpacking that. I would just say that in the moment, I made the choice that my energy level, what I was trying to achieve, I'm just going to go for the child who's going to be responsive. Now, what if you only have the one child? Now I'm down to just one child homeschooling. Now, what's going to happen when that child doesn't want to do an activity that you have planned? Really good question. And I will have to get back to you on that.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of it.
It could be also, since we're talking about the little kids, it could be also that they're not ready for that kind of direction. Maybe that's why the open-ended play will still give them those fine motor skills, but they get to do it themselves, like that Lego play and the Play-Doh. If you just maybe give them those resources, have the resources available for them, maybe they will. Because my middle child is like that. Now he's 5, but he just wants to do it his own way, the way he wants, whenever he wants. So just giving him those resources helped him use them. And also he's the guy who learns just from hearing while I'm talking to the older kid. Like he learned how to read and I don't even know how he picked up like all those CBC words.
Alhamdulillah for those. We need a nice balance. I see that Meriem is saying that her boy, one likes parkour and a lot of like movement activity, and the other one's like fine playing Legos. And there were times when especially if we were traveling, and we would have different activities and not everyone wanted to do whatever activity it was. One thing that I always did with my kids is that if suppose I was at a museum specifically for 1 out of 4 of my kids, the other 3 kids couldn't complain. They couldn't be like, when are we leaving? Like, why do we have to do this? Whoever it was for, we gave that person, like complete time. Like, we're here, you enjoy it, we're here for you. And then whatever activity was for the next person, we wouldn't complain. Because for me, and this is again, I would get really frustrated if someone was impatient with me. Like, when are we going to leave this? And then I wouldn't be having a good time. I'd be like, oh, they're so impatient. They want us to go. Now I have to hurry up and have a good time. And then we're going to go. And it ruins it for me. So same with my kids. If we're, for instance, parkour and playing Legos, it's no, right now we're playing Legos. We will go, unless it's like a class and parkour that you actually have to leave at a particular time. But let's just say it's going to the park. So no, this child is still playing with their Legos. We're going to give him enough time. Then when he's thoroughly done, then we can go to the park. And no, we're at the park now until we're completely done with this activity. And obviously you have scheduling and your own needs. So you can interject as you wish, but giving each child so that they really gotten what they need out of an activity, and also teaching the other children patience without it being like, now I'm going to teach you to be patient. It's just, that's part of like the family lifestyle.
Yeah, to respect each other and be patient with each other. Yeah.
May I read another question?
Yes. Yeah, Violet.
Yeah, Violet. What are your best tips for getting started with all of this for the first time? I want to be more active in doing all of this with my daughter, but it's overwhelming. I totally understand. To try and plan it out right now without worrying I will do something wrong. My daughter is 2 and I have a 4-month-old son. And I also need okay.
This is
So,
a very good question. It's like a lot of people have the same question.
So here's the thing, is that you've got 2 things. You have what you want to do and what you want to do less of. And in my opinion, purely my opinion, is doing less of the things that maybe aren't so good, just because there's research around screen time. So let's say you're reducing or eliminating screen time. Whatever fills that void is good. It's going to be good for your child. Now, granted, again, you have like open-ended toys, abundance of free time. She's 2, she's young, so maybe this might be a little bit better as she gets older, that she's there with you. If you're going to do whatever chores, errands, socialization, whatever you're doing, she's there with you. She'll learn something from that. So you're in the kitchen, she wants to be in the kitchen. You're like, oh my gosh, I have a 4-month-old. How am I gonna do this with a 2-year-old? Yeah, that's so much work. But all of that, even if it slows you down in doing whatever it is in the kitchen, as long as it's safe. Again, I just want to reiterate that. I know that I feel like I'm a broken record, but I feel like there's a lot of things that I was doing, like cooking with my kids, like in a backpack or in a sling, and having to be really careful about what I was doing. And then if I were to look back at myself now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're so close to the knife or the stove or whatever. And kids are fine, but your children, my boys just loved being in the baby backpack or the backpack. And they would climb up my back, still strapped in, and look over my shoulder as I was cutting up fruits and vegetables and cooking and doing dishes. They loved it. I could do all the chores with my kid on my back. There was my workout. My kid was happy. We all were exhausted by the time it was nap time, but we all got everything that we needed to do. But you have a 4-month-old, so that really changes things. You've got 2 kids really close together. If you need to do screen time because you need that break, take that break. My kids were 4 years apart. I didn't have that same challenge. So I don't want you to think, oh, great, that was like the last little bit of like my free time was to like give her a half-hour show. Then do it, because your mental well-being is like so important in all of this. So taking away the things that you don't want her to do frees up this time that whatever is in that spot, even if you are not actively doing something with her, is going to be something that's better than screen time. So don't worry, what am I going to do next? Don't worry about it, because at 2, she's probably going to put a lot of things in her mouth anyway that maybe you wouldn't want her to, I don't know, maybe she wouldn't.
The veggie scraps reminded me, my kids used to, I'll give them the butter knife and they'll cut the veggie scraps, because I had the same age gap, like 2.5. And they'll just hang out with me in the kitchen like that. I think what helped me the most is having these kind of resources available. Here, cut this, here, mix this rice. I'll give him extra rice and water just to play with in the sink and spend some time. It does get messy, but it's not as, the mess was usually not as big as that time that I got out of it.
And also as a parent, do what excites you too. Maybe having the kids in the kitchen is definitely not something you want to do. So
Yeah.
then you'll take them out to the garden, and that's just fine. Let's just keep all the mess outside. They can dig in the dirt, they can look for worms, whatnot, and let's just do all of that outside. Go with Look, we're going to see a lot of things that are beautifully done by a lot of people, and we're going to feel either inspired or discouraged. We're going to feel inspired and we're going to do it. It's going to be great. Or we're going to feel really guilty that we're not doing all those things. Honestly, the more that we can just take away the things that are really not supporting their development, the more whatever they are doing in that time instinctually is going to be good for them. And it's children are very intuitive and they're smart. They want their mom, then they want to explore. They will use their hands and their whole bodies to explore and to do their projects. And it's just a matter of us creating that space for them to do it.
Yeah. Do you have time?
Not much, maybe 7:45 at the most. I'm sorry, for me, I'm in California.
5 minutes.
So I need to, just because it's in between prayer time. So I will need to leave like in about 5 minutes, inshallah. But I did notice that someone wanted to, I think, unmute themselves.
Mesa. Yeah, Mesa, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is similar to Violet's. We started our screen detox this week, and I'm noticing more like how much downtime there is. And something that I've just been thinking about is, especially with regards to open play, my child has toys and things that are meant for open play, but they're just sitting there in their box. So does each toy or thing needs to be introduced to them? So one question is, how much teaching them to play should I be doing? Sorry, I'm saying them. My daughter is 3 years old, and then I have a 10-month-old. So she's just starting to get into it now. But so yeah, my question is like, how much do you like show them, or how much time should I be
Modeling.
spending? Yeah, how much time should I actually be sitting playing with them and modeling or teaching, and how much should I just leave it to them to figure out, even if it was getting bored and I don't know, just sticking to me instead of figuring something out to do.
Yeah. I love that you are thinking about, what you could do to serve your child in the best way possible. And she's really young at 3. And historically, we were not this focused on our children in the way that we are focused on our children today. In the past, we all had work to do. And I know we are probably at-home parents, and if we are working, we're not working when we're parenting, right? Maybe when they're sleeping or whatnot. I'm assuming most of us our job right now is raising our children. Historically, that wasn't the case. We were working and raising our children, and our children were with us. And we were either in the home or out of the home. And I don't mean like in a factory or at a desk job. That's more current. And so for so many thousands of years, our children were alongside us or with other children, naturally developing those skills, because wherever we were, those skills were going to get developed. If you're in the kitchen with your child, is going to naturally develop fine motor skills because she's maybe getting a cup, or she's copying you with the knife, like Meriem was saying, or cutting up kitchen scraps, or she's playing with Play-Doh. I'm sorry, actual dough. Play-Doh came about after we weren't playing with actual dough to make bread.
Yeah.
We had seeds. When you're taking a seed and putting it in the ground, that's fine motor skills right there. Now we've taken out all of these natural things that were occurring, and now we buy toys to mimic these fine motor skill developments. So I really sympathize, not easy. And when I thought that my children were basically just toddling around me, I don't know, wherever we were going, I remember going to the grocery store with so many kids. Like, what was I thinking? It was so stressful, but that's what we were doing. We were going and picking out food, and then we were home, and then we were at the park, and then whatever it was, we were doing things that naturally included developing those skills. Now we have these really great open-end toys. 3 might be too young. 3 might not be too young for another child. Maybe it's too young for your child. I had some of my kids who loved to play on their own and others who didn't. And I love what's out there as far as toys. They're gorgeous, but maybe it's not the right age or the right time for her. And also, sometimes kids really like their toys when another kid is over, and all of a sudden they want that toy all to themselves. And so sometimes like having that interaction, oh, actually this toy is all of a sudden interesting to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't want to take so much of your time. Just like Allah khairan for all this. I want to ask you if you have any resources to share, in case people don't know about your YouTube channel or anything you can share with us.
Yeah, primarily you can find me on my social media accounts under Pepper and Pine, as well as on my website. And I have been doing this for a little while, and I had been doing this even when my kids were younger. And the majority of the things that you will find that I share are usually for children about 6 or 7 and older. There's maybe only a few things that were really geared towards younger children, because usually those younger children were either copying their older siblings in play or just doing things around the house with us. There were very few activities I specifically did for younger children. So if you are looking for resources that I did, I won't have a lot of them, but there are tons of really talented educators and parents out there who specifically design things for their younger children. Even if it's simple, having little seeds to put into a cup as part of an activity that you can do, absolutely. That wasn't what we did, but those activities are definitely out there if you choose to do them. And also, again, if you don't, and your hands-on activities start at, say, 4, 5, 6 and older, totally fine. I know I didn't talk specifically about those kinds of activities, so I'll just say like things like knitting, sewing, working with clay, wax, dough, painting, any of the arts. Not any, most of the arts, of course, outdoor play, anytime in nature is going to be so restorative for you and your children. All of those things are going to help develop your child's skills. So, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so happy. We got a lot of good nuggets. Inshallah, I'll try to send the replay tomorrow and also a few notes. Just go over the replay and take some notes to share, inshallah. I'm very happy and what's the word? It just finally I got to talk to you about this subject, because it's been like going for years that I'm like, wow, I learned so much from you. And I think I just remembered that you said something, whatever that gives you joy too, as the mother, that's the kind of activities that you choose. And I always kept that and I applied that in my whole homeschooling journey, that homeschooling is not about the child only, just about both of us. So if there is an activity that you don't like, go look for the skill, not like that activity specifically. So our mental health is more important.
I want to, that is so true. And I want to end on one thing that Ruqayya is saying. She's, as long as children are breathing, they're learning, mashallah. Yes, if you can remember that Allah created them with that natural instinct, then we will relieve a lot of our mom guilt. So yes, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. I'm gonna stay just a little behind to see if there's any other question or anything, and then we can leave. So I still have 10 minutes. We're gonna go. If you have any questions, let me know. I think we answered Violet, right? Hiba said that my girls and I tried our hand at knitting. We followed your lesson on the octopus and each made our own. It was not easy for me. No, not so artistic, but my girls loved it and encourages me to try more of these. Yes, mashallah. That's amazing. My 9-year-old does not like formal instruction in ELA and math, so this year we are trying hybrid. We can have a live class. Others, which I was there, I can reinforce some material later. Do you feel guilty using an online program? Because I would love to teach it myself. I'm wondering if I give up too fast and should have waited before using the online option. I don't think so at all. So my advice for this, Fatima, is like, not advice, but like the way I look at it is that us, the mothers, are not like expected to be teaching all of it, but instead we're here to observe and provide our kids with the resources. For example, like I always say this, when we are And when our babies are sick, you don't debate by going to the pediatrician or not. You look at your child and like, okay, I see these symptoms. I need to find a solution, either over the counter, asking your parents, going to the doctor, whatever it is, to find a solution. So the same thing in homeschooling. Your job first is to look at your child, observe what's going on with them, listen to them, and then you find resources. If you can do it yourself, good. If you found an online class, that's good too. If you found a tutor that comes home, that's good too. So the goal is to allow your child to learn following their learning style, following like the best way to enjoy the learning. And you notice that he doesn't like the formal instruction, all of that. You're trying this new option, and make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah in it. And also remember that put your trust on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide you into making these decisions, because they're all like, we wouldn't know what to do. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding us through all of these decisions to raise our children, inshallah. Georgina, let me just see before. Niveen, how do you work around your impatience when you're trying to work with them, but they're not focused or receptive? So again, it doesn't have to be, are you talking about they're not focused or receptive about hands-on activities specifically, Niveen? Because then you can choose a different hands-on activities. It could be the style that's not something that they're interested in, or the, yes, when in doubt, go outside. Yes, or the time also during the day. So sometimes our daily schedule really help in encouraging the children to do certain activities. So if you're doing it at a time when they're very tired, or they're not interested in, like, they have so much energy, and Niveen, you have boys, mashallah, so maybe that time when they really have so much energy that they want to do a lot of gross motor skills activities, they don't want to do that. They don't want to sit down and do a different activity. And this is the privilege of homeschooling, because in school you have to go to a certain classroom at a certain time. That's not necessarily working for you as a person. At home, alhamdulillah, we have that privilege to do it differently. And as Maisa said, yes, sometimes like taking the book or the activity to the playground or to the backyard or whatever, it makes it so much better. It may work. So you try things around. Jazakallah khairan as well. Georgina, I know everyone says screen time is bad, but my nearly 2-year-old has learned more words from YouTube than she has from reading and playing with her. Is screen time really that bad? I don't have so much research on this, especially that the use of screen time that's happening right now, it's way, way more than before. So really everything that we have is really new. My perspective in it is that it's the overstimulation. The cartoons that we used to watch growing up are not the same that our kids watch right now. The resolution is so high, the colors are so bright, they move so fast that even when I'm watching, I get a headache. So my issue with screen time is that we don't want them to be overstimulated all the time. Yes, there are definitely like educational apps, there are educational channels on YouTube. Just have those by moderation, because we don't know the long-term effects. I was going to say something else. Yeah, also the dependency, because it's very captivating and distracting, like just for us as well. You find us on our phones for too long, because it's very captivating, and that's not a good thing. So we have to be the adults and be like, okay, you can only have it for this certain amount of time, and also just not let them depend on it, that they don't want to play or they don't want to do anything else. All they want to do is the screen time. Anything you want to do has to be in moderation. And that's good that she learned so much. You found good YouTube channels. Just make sure that it's on moderation, inshallah. I say there is a season that it's needed and others where it's not. Overall, the effects it has on the brain of a child is not the best. Yes, but overall life happens, and there are moments where a mother needs to utilize screen time, as long as it's not your default replacement of your attention, and Allah knows best. Perfectly said, mashallah. Yes, I'm in a season where my kids are not using screen time, because they have tons of things to do and they're busy in themselves. And there were times when we needed to have screen time, I don't know, like every afternoon. And there were other seasons again that we didn't need it. It goes on and off. Yes, your overall mental load is very important to look at, but also don't be frustrated with all the things that you have, or you want to, because sometimes just the reality that we are glued to our phones, that we don't want to, because the social media is captivating, we don't want to get bothered. So we're like, just put on another show, just put on another show. So take care of yourself, take care of the space, take care of yourself first. Then you look at your home space, organize it, make it inviting for the children to do those activities, and then inshallah I will invite them to do those activities, and they can not use the screen time as much. The long-term effect is very sad. Yeah. Also, Maisa said, if we think about the alternative to screen time, imaginative play, going outside, interacting with our kids directly are for sure great for the kids, whereas screen time is doubtful, yes, but it needs energy. And that's what we're trying to say, is that it needs energy from us, so we have to take care of ourselves. And one thing that helps me a lot, and my children's ages difference is 2 years and a half, 2 years and 3 months, and is setting up my home in a way where it's inviting them to play. Like when you take your child to a museum, the play museum, right? Do your children ask for the phone when they are there? No, they don't. They see where the train station is. They see all these kitchen toys here, and they see this here and there. They're very excited to go play. They understand the idea of, okay, come inside and play. That's my job to do here, right? When you go to the store, they understand that it's time to pick things off the shelves and put them in the cart so you can take them home. So they ask you, can we get this? Can we get this? Can we get that? So they're smart. They understand what's going on. Same thing you want for your home. You want for your home, when they come to the house, when they wake up in the morning, they go to this place and they see, okay, this is our imaginative zone. This is where all the toys are that help me like make scenarios, make like stories, make villages. I have some Legos and I can put with some dolls and I can talk to myself. And especially if you have alone, what do you call it? Like your older children's by themselves, you don't have siblings. This is what they do. They create worlds for themselves, and when you give them the space, they go to the kitchen, like, it's time to make food with mommy, I'm gonna help, I'm gonna do this. We have like here, we have our movement zone when the kids want to jump around and they have so much energy. You tell them, this is the movement zone, this is where you do it. So you set up your home, and this is something that I did, I think 4 years ago, and I've been doing it since, because it just saved me a lot of headache. And I think before my third was born. And yeah, so it's so much. Like every time we move to a new house, we have to do it. Now, like I just set up the movement zone and imagination zone, and we're working on setting our art zone for next week, inshallah, just so the kids know how to do the crafts. They have the Play-Doh available, they have the scissors, the glue, the markers, the paper, the sewing kit, the felting, whatever your children can be exposed to safely. I had seasons when the markers were not part of the out of the question because they were making a lot of damage. I had a season when scissors were not there, glue was only like a glue stick. Every season is different, but having an art zone, for example, helps a lot, because the child who wants to be directed, they will call you, mommy, I really want to do this activity, come sit down with me and let's do it. The child who does not want to be directed, they'll just pull out things and try to figure it out themselves, and then we'll teach them how to put it back, and that will help with cleaning, and that's it. I hope that was helpful. Meriem said, my nephew is an only child and I love catching his imagination time. Whenever we video call, my sister sneaks me into his playroom. Oh, yes. When they have the space to do that, they really do it. My oldest was an only child only for 2 years and a half, but I remember him playing and talking to himself and making these stories and sharing them with me and all that. Right, are there any other questions? Isra, my son is almost 8 and I reduce his lesson to 10 minutes outside through play. He will do it, though I don't feel he is enjoying it, and this applies to main lessons like spelling, for example. I usually follow his interest in teaching him through. Sometimes I know that he is weak in spelling and he needs to work on it, so in this case I will have to force him to do it, even though I know he is not enjoying it at all. You can try games. You can try, for example, I was talking about Dabble. That's a spelling game that we were doing this morning. You can try even apps. Again, like when we're talking about screen time, there are things like that. And yes, you can force him in terms of boundaries. When we finish this, then we can do this. When, like, you don't have to do rewards at all, but it's just like when we finish our 5 minutes lesson of spelling, children really like to know how long it's going to take. We're going to do these 5 sentences, 5 minutes, whatever you want to quantify it. You can even put a timer. Just make it easy for them to understand how long it will take. And they should trust you to take that long. If they're interested, you can tell them the time is done, but if you want to continue, you can continue. If not, this morning we were doing cursive. He finished the page and I told him, okay, we can move on to something else. I really want to do. I'm like, okay, if you want to continue, you can continue. And he continued another half a page, right? It's not something that you're always going to do the same way, but just quantify it and boundaries. Like when we do this, then we can do the next activity. If he really hates it, you can trick him by doing a fun activity. It looks like a reward, but it's not a reward. You're welcome. Alhamdulillah. Wonderful. Alhamdulillah. So yes, inshallah, we'll have the replay here sent to all of you. And keep in touch because every month we have a halaqa and we have different guests. Sometimes it's me, sometimes we have guests. I love having guests over. And I want to share with you my resources. The thing I like most relatable to this subject today is my Conquering Motherhood membership, where we talk about like how to set our home zones, how to create the movement place, the movement zone, like art zone, like things that I've been just selling because we just moved recently to this house and I'm working through it as well with everybody in there. So next week, for example, we'll have the art zone. If you're interested in joining us in this journey, learn how to make your home work for your children and for you as well, how to implement these hands-on activities just to make it a little less overwhelming. Marhaba, welcome. I can share with you the links. If you would like to join us, it's called CMM. You can message me about that. You can also look for a link and I'm going to send inshallah. Can you share what do you use for cursive writing if you don't mind? Yes, my son is 7, almost 8, and I wasn't using a workbook at all before. This year we just started using the workbook because I think now he's developed, his skills are developed enough to use a workbook. And we use the what's it called? Handwriting Without Tears. You just look up on Amazon, Handwriting Without Tears, and you'll find it. Let me write it here for you. But I did not start with that. If you didn't do hands-on activities to develop their fine motor skills for like a few years, for a while now, you can still always start. Instead of focusing on writing cursive, you can focus on, let's do play with clay, beeswax. Beeswax is here, Stockmar, I'll write it here as well. Beeswax is amazing as well because it's hard. They have to work their fingers to make it a little warm and mold it like clay. Sewing, knitting, all of these develops that hand-eye coordination and also helps the fine motor skills. After that, we start doing the book form drawing, ages 6 to something, 6 to 10 maybe. Form drawing is such a beautiful, pretty book. But I haven't seen it recently. I don't know where it is. Pretty book that shows the kids how to do drawings, how to draw in forms of lines and curves. And if you notice, our cursive is always either curve or a line. So the kids practice those fun drawings and forms without knowing that they're actually learning how to write with different colors. We did that last year, and this year we have this Handwriting Without Tears workbook, which is just like a fun break. I don't do it every single day, but he's really enjoying it, and it helps with spelling as well. So Isra, if you want to use cursive to help with spelling, because it takes a while to write, so you blend the letters as well. That helps as well. All right, Jazakallah khairan for joining us. I'm looking forward to see you again the next month. It's always going to be the second Thursday of the month. Yalla, assalamu alaikum, everyone.